Welcome to the Whisky Business Podcast, where we dive into the rich and fascinating world of whisky and the equally complex landscape of business. I'm your host, Ash Playsted, here to guide you through conversations that blend the culture and enjoyment of great whisky with the craft of building lasting business success. Each episode will be an exploration of the subtle connections between the smooth complexities of a fine dram and the strategic decisions that shape thriving enterprises. So pour yourself a glass, settle in, and join us as we discover how passion and precision make all the difference in both whisky and business. Playsted here. Welcome to the Whisky Business Show. Wherever you are today, I've got a little treat for you today. I'm going to talk about a really interesting whisky and a happy, sad story relating to that whisky and how it really relates very strongly to business and particularly the mortgage broking industry. So let's start with the best part, the fun part, right? Which is always the whisky. So up the back here, just going to reach up here and grab this beauty. Hopefully you can see that okay. So this whisky is from a distillery called the Lakes. And the Lakes is just below the southwest Scottish border in England. Now, this is the Lake Single Malt Whisky Voyage, 49% ABV. I'll give you a little bit of a description of this whisky straight from my notes, but I just want to tell you a little bit about a story first. So when I was in Scotland, I grabbed a bottle of this whisky, brought it home with me, and to be honest with you, it really hadn't sunk into me where the value was in particular whiskies. Yes, there's value in the quality of the materials and a few other things, but let's clear up a couple of things if you're not 100% certain. So the first thing is that whisky, all single malt Scotch whisky, to be called a single malt Scotch whisky, can only have three ingredients. Those three ingredients are malt, yeast, and water. They are the only three ingredients that are allowed to be included in any whisky. So you've got to argue, well, what makes any one particular whisky special? Well, then we go down to the aging process, which is the particular casks and the environmental conditions in which that whisky is aged. And there's lots of different casks from different parts of the world where the raw whisky, after it's produced, is stored for a few years, right up to 50 years for the really long-aged whiskies, where the whisky absorbs its characteristics, flavour, colouring from the casks. I'll come back to that story in a minute. Just while we're on this voyage, I want to read to you a little bit about this particular whisky. This was crafted by two former Macallan whisky makers. You know, Macallan being almost like the Coca-Cola of distilleries. You know, it's the one brand everybody's heard of. It's always referenced in movies. They've done a great marketing job. And the Lakes is the winner of the world's best single malt at the World Whisky Awards. And this particular whisky was a winner. Now, this distillery has really been a magnet for old Macallan talent. They've recruited a lot of great people from there to help with their whisky process and to really improve quality and reputation of the distillery. And the way that they make their whiskies, this particular method goes through a really slow 96-hour fermentation to elicit a lighter, creamier spirit. And it's augmented by meticulous multi-oak, multi-sherry maturation strategy inspired by the use of élevage by the cellar makers at cognac. So that's interesting. And by assessing the spirit at a regular interval in its aging, the head distillers can make decisions about whether each individual cask would benefit from a new cask type, i.e. swapping it to a new cask, new location, or even further blending. So there's this very iterative process of aging this whisky, which gives it a really incredible complexity. Now, this particular one, the Voyage, its colour is deep amber. Its nose is bright and fruity with spiced baked apple, medjool date, and freshly cut orange and beeswax. Its palate is a juicy palate of perfectly ripe red grapes, fresh fig, plum, and honey roasted nuts. Its finish is layered, mouth-coating finish filled with apple and blackberry pie and hints of spiced dark chocolate. The best food to match this with is freshly baked shortbread. No surprises there. Scotland's almost the home of, that part of the UK is the home of shortbread, being the home of Walker's famous shortbread makers. Now, I want to move a little bit on to beyond the description of the whiskey and on to continuing my story. So I bought this whiskey for about $130, okay? I opened it and had a sip, as you do with good whiskey. Good whiskey is for drinking. This is a little bit before I really cottoned on to whiskey as a really investable asset class. I found out about 2 months or maybe 3 months after I opened this bottle that this very bottle sold at auction for $2,115. So it's very desirable, very collectible, and brings a premium. So that's a 1,600% increase in value in a few months. Now, that might be an outlier, but it does go to show you how valuable the right whiskey can be. Now, mine is worth zero because I opened it. Whiskey becomes worth nothing as soon as you open the bottle. Obviously, like a lot of things that are collectible, great wine, great whiskey, even old movie memorabilia, a lot of those things that hold their value based on not being used, not being opened. Whiskey's the same. So how does this relate to business? So we look at whiskey and go, well, what makes a whiskey really desirable? What's its secret ingredient? What is it that goes into it that makes it special? What is it that goes into a mortgage business that makes it special? Is it the basics? Yes, you've got to do the basics. Good service, good products, transparency, honesty, choice, all the basics. You've got to have those basics in your business. Just like a whiskey, what are the basics? As I said, malt, yeast, water. So what makes this particular whiskey explode in value and desirability? What makes your mortgage business explode in desirability and value? So this is really where you come down to the eye of the beholder. This is coming up with your USP. What is your unique selling proposition? What is it that you do that is uniquely you? Now, this particular whiskey, very, very well done, right? They only make a certain amount of bottles. It's well marketed. I've spoken about marketing before, so people know about it. It's limited. Its provenance of its production is faultless. So it does all of the basics really, really well. But then it gets out to the market with a particular proposition to a particular audience and with a limited supply. And boom, she takes off. Now, how can you relate this to a mortgage business? Well, what is it about a mortgage business? Is it your service? Is it your products? Those things are super important. But I would argue that when you're trying to figure out what is going to make clients, your ideal clients, the ones that you want to serve that fit your strategy, your vision, your mission, what's going to make them beat a path to your door? This is what you've got to figure out. Just as at auction, buyers beat a path to this particular whiskey, right? And other whiskies, of course, but this is a really good example. It's worth a lot or it's worth zero in my case. So I just want to touch on that for a moment. Suddenly, everything's exactly the same about this whiskey, but because I've opened it, it's gone to zero in value. So it can be a fragile thing to understand what makes your mortgage business really desirable. Sometimes it takes a little bit of massaging and working around to understand it. And if you remove one ingredient, all of a sudden it dissolves everything else. So what I would say to you is nothing's changed with this whiskey except it's been opened. So it's suddenly popped the desirability back to zero. Right? So I've learned from that. And now I do buy a lot of whiskies for their value, as you can see, as collectible, and I buy whiskey to drink as well. So what is it in your mortgage business that gives it its unique characteristics? It's quite often it's you, it's the nature of your clients, it's how you communicate that message to the marketplace to have people come to you wanting your service, not because it's great, not because you're a good mortgage broker or you've been doing it for a certain amount of years, or you've got a certain amount of lenders on your panel. All of those things are just a given. There's 10,000 brokers that have got all those things. What is it about your business that makes people want to come to you? Get on social media, get on LinkedIn, get on other places and have a look at the content that's out there from certain mortgage brokers that are getting a hell of a lot of traction. They all do the same thing, but certain brokers are getting amazing traction and drawing a huge amount of inbound leads and doing some really amazing numbers by essentially marketing and positioning themselves as uniquely them. Right? So I would argue your USP is uniquely you. Now, that might seem to fly in the face of building a business that can work with or without you, but it doesn't. You can still build your unique selling proposition around you, your values, what you stand for, what you believe in. It just doesn't always need you to do all the business. Okay, so the brand and the business can live beyond you, even though it's uniquely you. I just repeat that. Your mortgage business can scale, grow, live beyond you, even though part of your unique selling proposition is built around you. That is the one thing you've got that's unique is you. Never forget that. So just as the Lakes whiskey was incredibly valuable based on its unique characteristics and being unopened, your mortgage business, its value, its growth is linked to what is uniquely your proposition. And a lot of that, I repeat, will come from speaking about what you believe in, what you value, out to the marketplace that resonates with people, that they want to come to you for that, not because you give great service. That's just a given. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on the connection between whiskey and business, fine whiskey and good business. Have a fantastic day ahead, and I'll see you on the next episode.